God is with us. But to those who are called, whether Jew or Greek, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. And this is because the foolish thing, and I can say, that's me, that has its source in God, is wiser than men. And the weak thing that springs from God is stronger than men. I stand before you today in myself a foolish and a weak thing. But God will work through our weaknesses and do absolutely jaw-dropping, amazing things in and through us. For simply consider your own call, brethren. Not many of you were considered to be wise according to human standards. Who would the world use? Well, let me read you something. You know, Jesus prayed all night before choosing his disciples. And really, if you look at the lot he got, you might think, I don't think you heard from God. How could you possibly pray all night and come up with the group you came up with? This is a little letter written to Jesus, and it's from the Jordan management consultant firm who are going to help him choose his disciples. This is the way the world would look at it. Thank you for submitting the resumes of the 12 men that you have picked for management positions in your new organization, Jesus. All of them have now taken our battery of tests, and each of them has had a personal interview with our psychologists and vocational aptitude consultants. It is the staff opinion that most of your nominees are lacking in background, education, and vocational aptitude for the type of enterprise that you are undertaking. They don't have a team concept. We would recommend that you continue your search for persons of experience. Simon Peter is emotionally unstable and given to fits of temper. Andrew has absolutely no qualities of leadership at all. The two brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, place personal interest above company loyalty. Thomas demonstrates a questioning attitude that will definitely undermine the morale of your entire team. We feel that it's our duty to tell you that Matthew has been blacklisted by the Greater Jerusalem Better Business Bureau. James, the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus, definitely have radical leanings, and they both register high on the manic-depressive scale. There is only one of your candidates, Jesus, that shows great potential. He is a man of ability, resourcefulness. He meets people well, has a keen business mind. He has contacts in high places. Highly motivated, ambitious, and responsible. We do recommend Judas Iscariot as your controller and your right-hand man. All the other profiles are self-explanatory. Jesus, we wish you success in your new venture. Who the world would throw away, God will pick up, choose, and use to do great things. Wow, that's so exciting. God's strength made perfect in our weaknesses. 2 Corinthians 12:9. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul had something that was bothering him. He called it a thorn in the flesh. It could have been the impatience I was dealing with this morning. It could have been some kind of suspicious thinking that you were having even when you walked in here today. They're weaknesses, things in our flesh. The spirit's willing, but the flesh is weak. We have to keep working with God. No wonder God gave us self-control. If we weren't going to have to control ourselves, if we were just going to get to the point of perfection and never even feel any of those things, then we wouldn't have needed self-control. He could have just left that one out. But Paul had a thorn in the flesh, just like we all have a thorn in the flesh, and he kept asking God to remove it. I wish I could never feel that kind of impatience that I felt this morning. I would love to never feel that. I would love to never have to battle with another negative thought. I would love to never have a suspicious thought about another person. I wish that all my thoughts were lovely and beautiful, but I still had to control myself. I still have to cast down wrong ones and choose right ones, and sometimes many more times a day than what I would like to. I still have to read scriptures every day on the mouth, because if I don't, mine will surely get me in trouble. It is amazing to me how I can go in my office and spend 2, sometimes 3 hours with God in the morning and walk out and say some stupid thing. So every day I pray, oh God, put a watch over my mouth lest I sin against you with my tongue. But you see, after 35 years of a strong walk with God, I've come to the point where I know that God knew about all of this before He chose me, and that He's not stressed out over it, and I don't need to be stressed out over it, because my weaknesses keep me knowing, God, you got to help me. Oh, God, you got to help me. If you don't help me, there's no hope for me at all. I don't know why you would use me. See, we don't ever want to get to the point where we think, well, no wonder God's using me. Praise the Lord. What a speaker I am. Hallelujah. Whew. No, you better stay in the point where you say, God, without you, I'm nothing. Any good thing that happens through me, it's only because you've wrestled with me long enough to get another little bit of my flesh to show your glory through. And if you leave me for 1 second, God, I will fall completely apart and make a total fool out of myself. Almost every well-known minister that has publicly made a disgrace of their life, if you can get close enough to find out what went wrong in them, they will all be honest and tell you that I got to the point where I had so much power that I thought I could do anything that I wanted to do. And you cannot do that. The minute we start thinking more highly of ourselves than we ought to, we're on our way down. So why didn't God answer Paul's prayer? 3 times. God, remove this weakness from me. Help me just think beautiful thoughts all the time. Help me just always be positive. Help me just always want to give and just love everybody all the time. Well, I pray that, and I'm getting better and better all the time, but I've not arrived. And you know what? I don't expect that we will completely arrive until the day that Jesus shows up and we get beamed up. And then in the twinkling of an eye, we will all be changed and become just like Him. God's not mad at you because you've not arrived. The only thing He wants to see you do is pressing on. So the good news is you're here today. That means that you care. That means that you want to grow. That means that you want to conquer and overcome. 2 Corinthians 12:9, and he said to me, well, we probably just ought to read the whole thing. Verse 7, and to keep me from being puffed up and too much elated by the exceeding greatness of the revelations that I was having. Whew, I love this. There was given me a thorn in the flesh. I mean, my gosh, God was using Paul in such an amazing, amazing, amazing way. And Paul knew. He knew that it was God. In 1 Corinthians 15, he said, by the grace of God, I am what I am. But a human being can only take so much. You can only take so much success. You can only take so much victory. You can only take so much of everything turning out right in your life, and you will begin to get full of yourself, and that's why every once in a while we have to have a little bit of a basing to go along with the abounding. And really, if you read Philippians 4 correctly, and don't just pull verse 13 out that says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. If you start in verse 11, Paul said, I've learned how to be content, whether I'm abased or abounding. I've learned. He learned it. I've learned how to be content either way. And you know how you can be content either way? You trust God enough to know that whichever you're having at the current time is what you need for that season in your life. And even though you don't like it, God is using it to work something good in you that will benefit you and His kingdom later on. Some of you probably understand that a little better than others. Most of you who do understand it have been through enough of it that you get it. Because you realize that you do your growing in the times of abasing. And you enjoy your growth in the times of abounding. So Paul said, I've learned how to be content, rather than abased or abounding. Then he goes on to say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. You see, we need to be at the point, because we're in Christ and he's in us, and we know that he's with us, that whichever we're getting, we can be the same. So Paul said, remove this from me. And 3 times I called on the Lord. He wouldn't do it. Verse 7, I'm going to start again because I want us to get this. To keep me from being excessively puffed up and too much elated by the exceeding greatness of these revelations. Let me just throw this out lest I forget it. One of the ways that a person can tell, if you're honest with yourself, one of the ways that you can tell that you're getting too full of yourself, and one of the ways I can quickly tell if somebody's getting too full of themselves, is if you get too full of yourselves and start thinking more highly than you should, the first thing that happens is you start to mistreat other people. You start to look down on other people. They're not as smart as you. They don't know as much as you. How could they think that? Why are you so slow? Why are you this? Why are you that? Why can't you this? Why can't you do what I do? Forgetting that the only reason why you can do what you can do is because God's grace is working through you to do it. It's not my fault that I can't sing. It's not my fault that I can't play a musical instrument. God gifts us in different ways, and all he wants us to do is find ours and use it to stop being critical and jealous and comparing ourselves and competing with everybody else around us. There was given him a thorn in the flesh to rack and buffet him, so that he would not be excessively exalted. Verse 8, 3 times I called on the Lord and begged him that it would depart. But he said, verse 9, my grace, my favor, and loving kindness and mercy is enough for you. It's sufficient against any danger, and it enables you to bear the trouble manfully. For my strength and power are made perfect in your weakness. I believe that every time I open my mouth, God's power is being displayed through my mouth. You've heard me say that I never liked my voice, because I didn't have a sweet lady voice. Still don't. If you would have asked me when I was a teenager what was my greatest, what would have been the thing I would have loved to have gotten rid of more than anything, I would have said my voice. I didn't like the fact that I sounded so every time I opened my mouth. I didn't like the fact that when I would speak, people would go. I can't hide anywhere I go, because once I open my mouth, it's over. That voice. Well, see, I didn't know, but God knew what he was doing. And God wanted to raise me up as a woman. And you can do whatever you want to with this, but I think sometimes because my voice is not real sweet, real sweet and so, I think it's a little bit easier for men to handle me sometimes. I know you've probably heard a lot of my funny stories, but we went to a meeting in Chicago one time, and we parked our van, and a guy pulled up on a motorcycle, tattoos all over, long ponytail, sleeveless shirt, chains hanging all over his leather clothes. And he recognized him when I got out of the van. He said, Sister Meyer, I got to tell you a funny story. He said, I listened to you for 6 months on the radio before I ever knew that you were a woman. He said, I would have never let a woman teach me anything. But I listened to you for 6 months before I knew you were a woman. By then, God had changed my life so much through you, I couldn't deny it was God working through you. So you just better start making peace with some of those things that you don't like about yourself. And just say, well, God, I don't know why you stuck me with this. It wouldn't have been my choice. But I'm just going to give it to you. You know what I want you to do today? So often I think we say, well, give God all that you are. Well, I think we should, but I want you to do something else today. I want you to give him everything you're not. Before any person leaves this building today, we are going to lift our hands up to God, and we are going to pray, and we are going to say, God, I give you what I am, but I especially give you what I'm not. And I am not going to stress over it. I am not going to be frustrated over it. You change me. You make me whatever you want me to be, but I am yours, gifts and weaknesses. Here I am. And you just might be very shocked at some of the things that you'll find God using. God knew that Moses didn't speak well in front of people when he called him. Moses didn't need to tell him that. Moses argued so long with God, God finally got angry. You know, I don't speak well, and I'm not this, and I'm not that, and I'm not something else. God knew when he anointed David to be king that he would eventually commit murder and adultery. Why in the world would God call somebody like that? God knows everything from the beginning to the end. He knows the middle. He knows every mistake that we make. But God sees our heart. God saw the heart of the little shepherd boy who wrote the Psalms and sang love songs to him out in the field. He saw the little shepherd boy whose family slighted him and rejected him. He saw his heart. And he calls us because of our heart. I'm not a perfect specimen, but I've loved God since I was 9 years old. I didn't always know how to love him right. I had a lot of compromise in my life for a lot of years because I just had religion and not a real relationship with God. I do a lot of goofy stuff, but I love God. And I'll tell you, that'll get you a long way. If you just fall more and more in love with Jesus and forget about everything you're not, you'll be amazed what'll begin to happen in your life. Just say, God, I know I'm a mess, but I love you, 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 and I'm your mess. See, you're God's mess. When the devil starts to tell you everything you're not, thank him for reminding you how good God is to use you anyway. I'm going to say something. I want you to remember this. If we're not impressed by our strengths, our talents, and our God-given abilities, then we can't be depressed by our weaknesses and our inabilities. I'll say it again because I can see you didn't get it the first go around. If we're not impressed by what we can do, then we can't be depressed by what we can't do. Paul said, I am what I am by the grace of God. Therefore, he couldn't get all wrought up about what he couldn't do. I like the man who came to Jesus for a miracle for his child, and he said, if you can do anything, help my child. And Jesus said, well, of course I can do it. All things are possible with God. And I love what the man said. He said, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. So he not only brought his faith to Jesus, but he admitted it's not perfect faith. I do have some problems here. I'm a little weak in faith in this area. And I think sometimes we try so hard to have perfect faith and perfect performance and perfect this and perfect that and perfect something else that God can't get beyond our own works to try to help us. Is anybody here understanding what I'm saying today? Jesus knew that Peter would deny him when he not only called him as one of the 12 disciples, but made him one of the 3 of his closest inner circle. Why did he purposely pick Paul, who was then Saul, a persecutor of the church, who had full intention of murdering every Christian that he could find? Why in the world would God use him? Because he had a lot of the gifts that God needed. They were just turned in the wrong direction. And the gifts that he had been given were given to him by God for God's purpose. He was just deceived by religion. So God chose somebody that was wretched because he wanted to use him in a great way. I think sometimes the greater God's going to use you, the worse you have to be when you start. Because Paul would never forget. No wonder he could write all the messages that we love so much today about grace. Because he knew the grace of God. And I know that God didn't call me for any reason that I deserve. I'm more amazed than anybody. In the natural, according to the world's standards, I'm not educated enough to do this. I don't have the right personality. I'm a little kind of in your face and outspoken and bold, and certainly don't have the right voice. I mean, I'm quite sure if the world would have been looking for a speaker whose voice would go round the world, that it wouldn't have been a lady with a voice like mine. But you see, the truth is it doesn't matter. Because, now listen to me, if God gets in it, it's going to work to the shock and amazement of everybody. I finally understand that the world is never going to get me. So I'm finished trying to explain myself to them. The world is not going to get you. How can they? Because it's God working through you. And if they don't know God, how could they possibly know and understand you? How in the world could I do what I'm doing? How could the Osteen family do what they're doing? How does Joel end up in Israel with the president, the prime minister? I mean, he says himself, shy guy, didn't even want to stand up and talk in front of a handful of people. Now he's meeting the president of Israel. How do you do that? God knew that Gideon was a coward when he called him. He knew he was from the poorest clan. Gideon didn't need to tell him, well, I'm from the poorest clan. And God looked at him and said, you mighty man of valor. See, God sees what we can be if we'll get our eyes off what we're not and get our eyes on him. Come on, is anybody home in the house today? Is anybody here?